Well, joining me now to take a closer look at President Obama's State of the Union address is Brendon O'Connor from Sydney University's US Studies Centre. Brendon, thanks very much for coming in. Was inequality for you the main keyword from the address given by the US President?
That's where Obama started. It was obviously a big part of the speech, but I think it was a little less of the speech than some people predicted. He went on to, I think, talk about immigration. He eventually got to foreign policy in a pretty perfunctory way. But I think there was actually quite a lot in the speech where people, I think, thought inequality, the big gap between rich and poor sort of in America would be the central theme. And I actually thought the central theme was taking it to the Republicans, sort of saying, look, this cooperation business that I came in on hasn't really worked out, and now I'm going to take a slightly more partisan, maybe a more traditional approach.
Well, the State of the Union address is often a big vision opportunity for US presidents, but was he actually trying to just say, look, don't expect me to make any great inroads into my legislative program with this divided bunch in Congress, but I'm going to do what I can in order to help my fellow Americans out. Was that generally his take home?
Yeah, I think so. We saw this on the environment. I think there was another issue that came up, that the EPA, the American Environmental Protection Agency, might be called into action more to test emissions, to set higher standards. So I think there was a sense of, a bit like Obama's second inaugural address, if I'm going to go down in history, I want to go down at least with my issues being tested, and I don't want to go down seemingly being too moderate or too conservative. So I think it was a little bit more strident than in previous State of the Union addresses.
Do you think he was also trying not to set the bar too high for himself? Last year, 2013, has been widely pilloried as his worst year. Was that because he had this great vision which he couldn't achieve? So in 2014, he's setting the bar a lot lower.
I think he was more specific. He wanted gun reform. I mean, the Sandy Hook, that horrible shooting had occurred. So I think he set himself out maybe on immigration a little more specific, where this time I think he has a similar set of issues, but it was a bit more ideological. Rather, it was a bit more, this is what I believe. I believe in equal pay. Isn't it a disgrace that women are only getting, 75% of men? And he got a huge chair and that rallied people up, but he didn't say, look, I'm going to bring a bill to the House and I'm going to make an argument.
I'm going to do something about it. All I'm going to say is identify it as a problem.
I mean, in some ways, the situation is really interesting. The economy is improving in the United States and his popularity is going down. And that's not what we're used to. With Clinton, the more the economy got better, it didn't matter about Monica and the Starr inquiry and the impeachment hearings. He got more and more popular in many regards. And Obama is in this funny position of things are in fact getting better in America and he's getting less credit for it.
Yeah, well, you've actually preempted my next question, because I was going to ask you about that. Is focusing on growing income inequality in the United States his way of telling Americans that he feels their pain, that they're obviously still feeling, even though the US economy is back on the road to recovery?
Indeed, because I think the economy has really bounced back maybe at the sort of market end in the financial sector. The Dow Industrial is over 1400, which is often a benchmark. So it's probably not a very widely spread sort of bounce back America's gone through. The middle class, people in middle incomes are struggling. If you're at the bottom end of the sort of thing, you're probably likely to have had some period of unemployment, even long-term unemployment. So there is a lot of pain in that economy, and there's a lot of blame to go around in some ways in that long recession America's been through, or dip in its economy. So I think he's trying to sort of assert himself, if things are going to get better, we've got to look after those who are going to still be struggling. And that is an interesting message, because Americans are probably, say in the Clinton period, more likely to say, okay, we've got through that, we don't really need to make major reforms to our distribution of income. And I think Obama is a little more inclined to do that than any other president in recent years.
Something I thought was interesting today was the reaction from the Republican Party itself. As we saw a moment ago in Lisa Miller's package, they rolled out a leading female Republican, Kathy McMorris Rodgers, to provide its rebuttal of President Obama's address. Could we read into that a little bit of an indication of how the party might prepare for the prospect of a Hillary Clinton presidential bid?
Well, the Republicans have a problem with women. I mean, there's a massive gender gap, a gap of 10 or 15% in the vote, more favouring the Democratic Party to the Republican Party. That's significant. I mean, it's not quite where the African American vote is with about 90 to 95 to 5. But, as half the population, you can't alienate women, as the Republicans have tended to do a little bit too much. So I think they're aware of it. Some people are saying, well, you can't just cosmetically wheel out a female speaker. You've got to actually change some of your policies and attitudes. So I think that will be an issue. But I think there is a thirst for a female president, and I think Hillary will really run hard on that. I think her real sort of threat is probably from another female candidate in the Democratic Party, Elizabeth Warren, who can come along and say, look, I could be the first female president, and I'm not a Clinton, and I bring to the table maybe some more progressive ideas than Hillary.
Okay, one of the other interesting things about the Republican response is that they actually couldn't settle on a single Republican to provide a rebuttal to President Obama. They had about 3 different well-known Republicans speaking out in response, indicating that the Republican Party is still very much a house divided in the United States.
Indeed. I mean, there was a Tea Party spokesperson. I think Rand Paul had his own pre-recorded...
Another presidential hopeful, perhaps?
Indeed. I mean, that's what Obama probably needs to exploit. This is a party that is on a bit of the brink of some sort of inner sort of turmoil. It went through a pretty bad period with a debt ceiling last year, which John Boehner called some of his own colleagues destructive. So I think Obama has got to work on ways of exploiting that. That hasn't been his nature, but I think maybe a more canny Obama might say, look, a divided Republican Party is good for the Democratic Party, and we've got to work on where there are these tensions and where there are these Republicans who are really outside of the mainstream.
Meanwhile, the State of the Union address gives him an opportunity to speak directly to Americans. It gets blanket coverage, but it has been pointed out today that of the around 33 million Americans that were expected to tune in, it's a long way short of the more than 100 million that will be watching the Super Bowl this week. But just by means of reality check, 33 million people tuning in to watch a politician give a speech is no mean feat, is it?
It is that one moment every year that the president can say, hey, look at me, I'm still relevant, these are my ideas. It's the most important speech apart from your inaugural addresses. So it is something which can attempt to change people's opinion, but over the years we've got to learn with Obama. He's a great speaker, he can make it sound very good and easy, but it doesn't often reflect in his polling numbers, which have largely basically gone down since he got elected as president. So I don't think it will change things fundamentally overnight, but I think he's likely to maybe go through a better period in the year ahead. I mean, it's hard probably not to, and if the economy continues to improve, it's hard not to see Obama getting some of the credit for that.
Okay, Brendon O'Connor, thanks very much for coming in and giving us the benefit of your insights there on the State of the Union address.
My pleasure.